All right, good afternoon, folks. Welcome to Live with Jeff, Johnny, and Lee. Sorry for the delay. I am at an extremely remote and secure location somewhere in the mountains of Virginia. And, well, that's about all I'm going to tell you about here. But with me today, I have both Jeff and Johnny. Jeff, how are you, sir? And thanks for doing this on a Saturday.
Well, I'm doing okay. Happy weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to be en route north tomorrow, so Monday's going to be a surprise for everybody. Johnny, how are you?
I'm great. And I would just like to say hello to all of our new viewers today.
Yeah. I'm sure we're going to have a lot more new viewers today.
I'm sure we are, yes.
So,
while everyone's having they're getting ready for their lunch hour,
Yeah. Wonderful thing here. Well, you don't really know what time it is when you're underground. So
no.
The windows don't do you any good. They're kind of like on submarines.
No, yeah, that's true. They're on Zulu time in there then.
Absolutely. So we have a lot to talk about today. And, well, Johnny, do you want to start with the map, or do you want to start with these beautiful scenic pictures that we have?
Well, let's start with the which one would you guys like to do first? Would you like to do do you guys want to do the map first, Jeff?
Yeah, let's do the map.
You want to do the map first?
Sure. Let's
Okay.
do the map. Yeah.
All right. I do apologize in advance for my scratchy voice, because this is a very odd time that this is being done. So I usually have more of a preparatory period to get my voice together. But sorry, we're just going to have to deal with it. But anyhow, so Putin took a trip in the last couple of days, and the Japanese are not happy about it. Well, where did he go? He went to this place, this island. If you could zoom out, Lee, and show us where we are. This is one of the, this is the second island chain up. You can see Hokkaido province from Japan, the big landmass down below. But Putin went to the second island chain up there. This is in the Kuril Islands is where he went. And the Japanese were just not happy about it, not at all. Now, we've looked at this place before. Now, I understand that. I'm
and these are contested islands. These are supposed to be Japanese islands, and the Russians took them at the end of World War II. Is that correct?
That is correct. In 1945, Stalin just said, yeah, we're taking these and we're not giving them back. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, they would have invaded Hokkaido if they gotten the chance. But the war ended. The Japanese agreed to surrender terms. But yeah, it's been a point of contention. No, people don't realize that Moscow did not sign a peace treaty. There was no agreement on ending the war between Japan and Moscow at the end of World War II. So technically, they're still at war.
See, this is why I love having you on the show, because I didn't know that.
Yeah, and the rhetoric between the two countries. I think it was a couple of years ago, Medvedev went to the Kuril Islands there north of Japan and kicked up some dust, saying, this is Russian territory. This is never going back to Japan. And it caused a bit of a flap back then, because this is a piece of Japanese territory that was never returned to Japan, that Russia just kept. And so it's, in fact, half of Sakhalin Island, which is much further north, belonged to Japan, before World War II, or during World War II, before 1945. So it's a sensitive issue between the two countries. And of course, Japan, on July 1st, Japan had a big summit with the Ukrainian foreign minister, and they formed a kind of alliance, which of course set off alarms in Moscow, because Japan has all this technology and industry. And you combine that with what the Ukrainians have learned about drones and how to make war and how to innovate with drones. You've got two countries getting together there that are going to really do a lot of damage to Russian military interests and to China's too.
Yes, and we're going to show how the Russians are already worried about that. We've got some satellite imagery that's fresh. I'm talking 72 hours old. We're going to be looking at that here in just a minute to kind of correlate with all of this. On top of what you just said, with the Japanese-Ukrainian alliance as far as drone development and technology sharing and things, they also have on the European side of things, that's the Far Eastern side of things. On this side, they've got the Germans that have done this. So now what do you have? This plays right into the Russian propaganda hands of the new Axis, right? This new Axis, same as the old Axis. And you can see where they're playing this in a propaganda campaign against the West.
Yeah. Well, there's a big propaganda battle going on between Ukraine and Russia. The last day or two, you saw Foreign Minister Lavrov on Russian TV saying that they have more effective methods. And of course, what are the methods for winning the war? They're going to freeze Ukraine during the winter. This is what everybody sees. Ukraine does not have adequate defense against ballistic missiles. And the Russians are preparing a big ballistic missile assault. The Iranians are even shipping missiles from their massive missile production to Russia. And
so are the North Koreans.
Yeah, and the Ukrainians are responding that, oh, we won't freeze. We'll warm ourselves on your burning refineries. So, yeah. So I guess both countries are they're digging in their heels, and good grief. I think if they pull off the mobilization after the Duma elections here in the second half of next month, the Russians, if they can actually mobilize 800,000 men without causing a revolution in Russia, they hope to cause the shock of a freeze attacking the infrastructure, and then have a giant assault coming in from the north, and especially the north, but also probably renew their assault from the west. That's what the Russians are hoping to do. And of course, it is a very, unless they have some trick of stopping Ukrainian drones, they're just going to be slaughtered when they come. So I don't understand how this is going to work. Do you, Lee? Do you have any insights on what the Russians, do they have anything new?
Okay, so I've been doing a lot of research in this over, I guess, the past 5 days, since all this is, how should we say, bucked up. So we now have over 151 documented incidents where Russia has attacked a NATO or European country since February of 2024. So those 151 documented attacks are showing that Russia has kicked off its hybrid warfare program. And so they've attacked in Germany, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Romania, Bulgaria. Yeah, thank you. Bulgaria, the trucks being caught on fire in Germany, the drone landing.
Poland.
In Poland, right, in Poland, but the one landing at the airport next to the Antonov aircraft, and then the other aircraft actually hitting a drone. Thank God that Russian detonators suck, because it would have been a catastrophic incident on the ground if the one that hit the Antonov would have exploded, and it would have been a catastrophic event if the plane that hit the Russian drone had that drone gone off. So there's a lot going on. Also, the Spetsnaz have sent all of their troops that are going through their rotation. So I got the Spetsnaz rotation, and what they're doing with the Spetsnaz is, as they come off the line, they get 90 days at home, and then they're going to 90 days of drone school. So they're doing drones that are guided by fiber optic. They're doing maintenance. They're doing espionage. They're doing reconnaissance. So they've got 90 days of classes that they're taking on how to use and deploy drones on the battlefield. And so they're getting ready for a push. with everything that they're moving in, the stuff that they've done in Kaliningrad, and the stuff that we're about to see on these photographs, these surveillance photographs, they're getting ready to move. It's obvious.
So Russia's going to up their drone game.
Oh yeah, and they're going to move into the Baltics.
And so here's the news from Germany. Now there's local elections coming to Germany, and this is all fits in with your the unrestricted warfare and intimidation by the Russians. The AfD party is expected to win these local elections, and the candidates are promising when they get control of these provinces in Germany, which are mostly in the eastern part of Germany, they will block the movement of supplies to Ukraine from Germany. They will say no supplies can cross our provincial areas, and so creating a kind of crisis, because Ukraine is getting most of its supplies now from Germany. Germany's their biggest supporter. And so this is, the Merz chancellorship is doing this, and this is the opposition. And the AfD has been gaining ground and in that country. And so this is really problematic. And it seems to be all coordinated with what you're talking about. So there does seem to be a storm coming here. And do you think this is going to begin in November, December, January? You say 90 days of training? Yeah.
I would just like to point out one thing on what you just mentioned about what's going on here. So a couple of things have taken place. So you have the Merz government, the CDU, they're talking about expanding the ability to, I think the word I heard was arrest people that interfere with NATO shipments going across certain territories. This is being looked at. That's what I heard. Don't know how it's going to fly legally, right? Because it's going to become a court battle kind of thing. So I don't know, but that's what I've heard before. I've also heard something else. They have now, just in the last day or so here, they have massively expanded the powers of the BND, so the Federal Security Services in Germany. So I'm assuming that this is in preparation to deal with what you're talking about. So
they're going to deploy their security forces against these AfD people.
Just looking at the reports and what I'm hearing from people, this is the assumption that I'm making, is that, yes.
Yeah, that makes sense. And also with Japan, I think that this war is becoming a was developing towards a two-front war against Russia, because I think Japan is rapidly extending its preparations, and I don't know a whole lot about what Japan is doing. They're holding their cards close. I know there's been meetings in the United States for the last few years since the war began about swapping technology, and the Japanese very interested in missile defense, of course, and very interested in drones. And Japan, with its the last great industrial power among our allies that we can rely on, a very important country. And of course, they're right there on the front line in this situation.
Now, you know that they were talking about changing their policy of making it from being just a defensive organization to an offensive or regular military organization. You want to go into depth for that so people understand?
Well, Douglas MacArthur, who ran the occupation of Japan, he made what they call the MacArthur Constitution in Japan. And it's a pacifist constitution in the sense that Japan is allowed to only have a defense force. The Japanese defense forces, it's basically not allowed to develop offensive weapons, according to their constitution. And it's been very difficult for them to overcome this. It's become almost a cultural thing with the Japanese, part of their political culture. Overcoming it is a problem, but maybe because of this Russian-Chinese threat, and it is a very serious one, they seem to be progressing towards overcoming this. And of course, there's a couple things this would mean is, of course, drones are largely offensive weapons. Missiles are offensive weapons, but also nuclear weapons. Japan is a country that could very rapidly become a nuclear power and a nuclear superpower because of the amount of nuclear material they have. I think they probably have weapons-grade uranium and plutonium in good supply. They might have, I've heard experts say, you got a 3-4 month turnaround. They could have a number of nuclear weapons very quickly. And that would change everything in Asia if Japan became a nuclear power, developed its own deterrence. And I think with Trump's erratic behavior has maybe frightened many people around the world that the American nuclear umbrella is just not sufficient, because America may not always be reliable. Its president may not always support, Japan, and Japan's relationship with Taiwan. In World War II, many of the countries under Japan were unhappy, like the Koreans, the people in Manchuria, in China, but the Taiwanese love the Japanese. They are, their cultures are, compatible. And so they have a close relationship, and it's very serious for Japan wanting to defend Taiwan. And of course, this is a big motivation for Japan, given the statements by the Biden administration and others, seeming to waver on defending Taiwan. And of course, Australia is not going to be any help. There's a secret defense treaty with, I think, Australia and the U.S. and Japan over Taiwan. That is called into question. So the Japanese have to kind of take responsibility. And it looks like, thanks to Abe, who was assassinated here, what is it, 3 years ago now, last month, he was assassinated. He was the one who was, really opposing Russia and China within Japanese politics, really moving the ball on security more than any other Japanese leader. And here he was martyred. If the assassination the Chinese did have a hand in it, or the Russians, it backfired. His party became more powerful as a result. And I think this, if anything, his name and what he did may cause this thing to tip the balance. So they will change their constitution and they will develop the weapons.
I think you also have another danger in Japan. And when I say danger, I mean you have a nationalist party there that has allied themselves with specifically the AfD in Germany. And this has become a thing. You've seen where the party heads have done their official meets and greets in Japan with this, and they're gaining popularity. And of course, this is another play by like Dugin and the Russians.
Well, Dugin has gone to Japan and has interacted with those people. So, again, Russia has traditionally, as having been the Soviet Union, has had major agents within the leftist parties. But now in the last, decade and a half, more than that, they've developed right-wing parties through their agents of influence in various Western countries, Germany in large part, with the AfD, but also in Japan and in the United States. There's an attempt to infiltrate MAGA. So, and influence. So these influence operations are really their ace in the hole that the Russians have. And and then you add on top of it the closing of the Strait of Hormuz. The good news about Japan's oil supplies is that in June, Japan only lost 4 days of its, I think it was 4 or 5 days of its oil stockpile. So it's still, as of earlier this month, they still had over 200 days of oil left if they ran completely out. They're managing to get oil from other areas. They're managing it, and they're managing their oil supply really effectively in Japan, which is surprising. They are the most vulnerable. They get, 93% of their oil from the Middle East. And with this oil cutoff, Japan has done an amazing job. I don't know how they've managed it, but they really have. It's Europe that's really in more trouble now with the Middle East oil being cut off.
Yeah. Shall we get to the map, Lee? We got a few points to cover on there.
There you go.
Okay, very good. So this airfield, I suppose we can start down here. You've flown this airfield before, yes?
Yes.
So this is where Putin landed. This is where he came in, and as you can see, it's a pretty nice airfield. They've been doing quite a bit of work on it over the last couple of years, and they've moved in some maritime Sukhoi fighters you see there. So yeah, they've been doing a lot of upgrading on this place, but he decided to take a little road trip. So next pin, please. in the last 5 years, the Russians have built this facility here. Now, we looked at this and we've kind of theorized that it's a place where they could train athletes kind of in isolation kind of thing. But the thing is that, I mean, I find that a little difficult to believe, even given the Russian dual use concept. I find it difficult to believe because 90% of the year out here, this is pretty much like frozen over. You know, it's not exactly the most hospitable place in the world. And you just, I mean, I wouldn't want to train in that if I'm an Olympic athlete. I just wouldn't. And of course, I don't even think the Russians, are they even allowed in the Olympics now? I don't think they've been allowed back in.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
Yeah. So well, anyway, this facility was one stop. And then the next pin, as you can see, we're going to go, this is the only thing that's north of that airfield. If we go to the second one, we're going to go south, Lee. Move down south. I thought I had it right on the thing. I do apologize. But you'll see the facility there in town, just on the left, right there. Okay, yeah, that's it. So this is the second. Looks like a big X there, right? Oh, okay. So it's a separate pin. My mistake. So the other facility that was visited was this here. And again, something that's been built in the last 5 years. And as you can see, it's fenced in, walled in, and no one can get into it. Doesn't exactly look like a school because they have those around town. And there's, like I said, there's really nothing else out there. So it beggars belief as to what they could actually be doing in there. Now, I'm sorry, if we could jump up one pin and then go back. Next one, please. It'd be the third one. My mistake. I thought I had them in the correct order. Okay, so this bay. This is a deep water bay, as you can see, that they've put in. They've dredged all this out, and they're still continuing to. You can kind of see where they're doing some dredging operations in and out of there. But you can get just about any kind of military ship in there that you want, any kind of military supply ship. Now, if we start here and we follow the main road, the main paved road out of this place.
North
and
or
we
south?
go north. We're going to go north.
Okay.
Okay. And what we're going to do, as soon as I can see you going north there, what we're going to do, we're going to come up to a little intersection where they have a double bridge that they've put in right here. Okay. So, and you can see they're still building it. They've got the builders and the excavators in there. Now, you see there, we're going to go across that bridge, and to the right, we're going to, yeah, you see up in here, this is where you said that they've hollowed this out. You can see where they even piled the dirt up right outside of it. See that? So this is going to give a little bit more of a verification to what you said, Lee, because you thought they just hollowed out this entire thing. Well, I'm going to show you how they've done that. So we're going to go back down the road, and we're going to go to the bridge right there, right there. And you're going to see where they're starting to cut a road to the right. Jump across the water there to the right. Right there. No, you had it. Okay, go north and then right. It's a very rough road. Okay, we've gone past it. Right, go down, and then you're going to see, yeah, and then now go right. Yeah, that's it. You got it. And we're going to follow that, all what they've put in here.
Another entrance.
There's two entrances.
Yeah.
There's that one, and then there's one right behind it.
Yeah, we got to get an icon for like a tunnel entrance.
I'll get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm working on pulling all new graphics and things. So yeah, I'll get it. But I thought it'd be close enough. Anyhow, yes, you can see where they've, and you can bet if they've got two entrances here, you can bet that they've tunneled all the way out to the northern part there. So, and God only knows how far they've gone back in there.
All the way.
You think all the way?
Yeah. Look how big that mountain is.
You think, you know what? That's actually a good point. You think all the way across?
Yeah. Why wouldn't you? Look how big that is. They can be pulling stuff out of that. They can build whatever they want in there for years and stockpile it, just going in through the tunnel entrances in the side. I mean, they can just take it right in the hole right there and go straight in.
Yeah.
I mean, it looks to me like they've built a huge facility here underground, and that's why Putin came here.
Yeah, again, there's nothing else out here. I mean, I'm going to show you the other points on the map here on this island, but this is where he flew into. And I don't think he went anywhere else. I don't think he went south.
You want to know how much dirt they took out?
Is that just the dirt
Yeah, this
pile
is
that
their
they're piling up
spoils.
there?
That's the spoils right there. So if you want to know how far they're digging back in here, they built a communications tower over here. But if you want to know how far they've dug back in, this is their spoils pile.
Well, they're not dumping it offshore, are they?
Nope. Hell, they're separating it out right here.
Well, they need a lot of concrete.
Yes. Yep. And it's all right here. They get the material there, they separate it out here, they go out on the road, and they haul it straight up here into the facility. I mean, they're hard at it here. This is significant. I mean, look at the size of that. That's a lot of dirt. I mean, considering this is a road, they're just piling it in there. Yeah, I can see why the Japanese would be upset, especially with Russian and Chinese ships patrolling off their shore there. All solar, look at that. Not a very smart Russian to put them on the north side of the building, but they're Russians. Oh, wow. So this is their cooling. You see that?
Is that what you think that is?
I know that's what that, look here. So here's where it comes out.
So
okay.
It's a circulation unit.
Yeah. And so the water is cascading down here, cooling off, going down through here, comes into this pond, and then is going right back out into the ocean. They're pulling water from somewhere. Somewhere down here there is an intake. They've got an intake here somewhere.
Could they be pulling it off of the? I know where it is. I see it. So if you go down, yeah. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to zoom out, and then you're going to go north along the top of the island there. There's going to be a massive lake that's going to be on top of the kind of almost on top of the mountain there.
You talking about this right here?
Well, that's one. They're probably pulling from the other place too. So zoom out a little bit so I can see. It's going to be up there to the left. So it's going to be past that. Yeah, right there. Right there.
Yep.
My guess is that's where the glacial melt runs in. You see that?
Yep. I love how they've got.
So I would guess that that's probably a spring, and that's probably and it's glacial melt, and that's where they're pulling it from.
I think they're using too much water for that to be the case. Look at the flow here. I think they're pulling out of the ocean, and they're using ocean water to chill with.
Can you do that?
Yes.
Can you chill with salt water?
Yeah.
With the brines, the salinity levels?
Yeah.
Can you do that?
You just got to. What you have to do, it has to be stainless steel.
Okay, I see what you're saying. So the
as,
corrosion, yeah, okay,
right.
I got
so
you.
as long as you use stainless steel, and you're basically just using a giant heat exchanger. And so as long as everything in that is stainless steel, you can flow right through it. I think they're pulling in, and the reason I say that is because when you look at the flow of water, look at that. See that and see that, and it's coming down through here, swirling back and forth to cool. Okay, and then coming back out. I wouldn't be surprised if they don't have a frickin' nuclear reactor in there. I wouldn't be surprised at all, because look at that look at the size of the cooling pond here.
Can you cool? Can you cool a nuke with salt water? I don't think
you can cool a nuke. Yes, because you're simply using a heat exchanger. So it's the exact same way that ships cool their engines. Every ship out there in the ocean cools with salt water.
Okay.
And they have a heat exchanger, and they're just piping it right through. I mean, there's a lot of hot water coming out of there. Look at all of these fountains they've got out here.
Yeah, I see.
And this ain't
this
septic.
Doesn't exactly. Well, it's not septic, and that doesn't look like a vacation destination.
Of course it is. These are fountains and a pretty waterfall coming down here. This is cooling. They've got.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, are they? Is there a problem with rust with salt being exposed to your equipment?
That's the thing. Everything that the salt water touches is either concrete or stainless steel.
Oh, but even stainless steel, is it really perfectly stainless? I mean, I've noticed my stainless steel stuff does eventually rust.
That's it's a lower grade of stainless steel. It's below a 440 stainless.
I see. So this is really able to resist rust.
Right. And so they make it all out of high quality stainless steel. They can pull the salt water in through. It goes through the heat exchanger, and then after it goes through the heat exchanger, it comes back up through these fountains here. And when it comes back up through these fountains, it cools it off in the air here. And then it runs down through here, comes down into this lake, this basic cooling pond, and then makes its way back out.
Okay, I'm gonna help you add to this.
Okay.
So what I want you to do is I want you to zoom out, and I want you to see the pin in the middle of the map where the airport was, where we started.
Okay.
And then I want you to look southwest. And look at what they've got. Look at the direction to the right. Look at where it's pulling to.
Yeah.
And then if you go further than that, follow that, continue following that to the right. And it just disappears into the mountain.
Yeah.
And there's nothing else out here other than that.
No.
So my guess is that they've done everything out here.
Yeah. Yeah, I doubt these two buildings here are for a retreat. But yeah, they're pulling water through there and running it through here. Wow. Yeah, that's where they're getting their water from.
That's crazy.
I see now why the Chinese or the Japanese are so concerned about what the Russians and the Chinese are doing.
Yes.
I mean, we've looked at this, but I didn't realize that they had went this far.
I just caught the two other entrances.
Yeah. I mean,
but when you throw in the water circulation now, and then we're just finding that other one just now.
Yeah.
That just adds to it.
Yeah, so they're still using salt water for cooling, and this is their fresh water. Down here. This is their freshwater intake. So this is their drinking water. Wow. And it flows to the sea. See here? It flows all the way down there. So it's a freshwater lake. And they're pulling off of this end for their drinking water. Crazy. And then when you look at what the Chinese have built in the South China Sea with those fortresses.
Oh yeah. Well, why build a fortress when you've already got one? You just need, and the Russians love to dig, right?
Right.
So why build an artificial fortress when you, well, I guess I shouldn't say that, but why go out and build in the ocean when you can build what you already have? You know, you can build out and outfit what you've already got, and it's unsinkable.
Yeah, well, I think that's probably the only carriers that the Chinese and the Russians have that are unsinkable.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the Russians are doing a pretty good job of sinking their own stuff.
Well, yeah, we're going to see that here very shortly. So, do we want to continue on, or do we, because of time constraints, do we want to go, because Jeff has to go in 30 minutes? Shall we get to the? Do you just want to do the satellite imagery?
Let's run through the.
Instead of
have we hit all the pins? Let's just.
No, we've not. We're going to go to the fifth one down. Yeah. So as you can see down here, there's an underground facility here, and this is just some training grounds. This is just further south on the same island. There's an artillery brigade here that they've put in. They've put in all new housing up here. You can see where the pin is. That's new housing. To the north of that is new housing in the last 5 years. This building's also new that they've put in there. I think, and if we look very closely, I think in this building they could possibly have Iskanders in there. I don't know. I'm basing that on the hardware we see outside.
Sure looks like it right there.
I'm just basing it on what we've got there.
Yeah, it sure looks
the
like it
casings
there.
And everything you see.
Yeah.
That's what I think are there.
Absolutely.
Next, this is just a helicopter base, again, further south. And that's going to be all that's on this island. Now, the next island, this is just north. Putin did not go to this island. He went to the one we just previously looked at, and he went to the one north of there, where they've got Tu-160s on the runways up there at that particular place. They've also built out some new underground bunkers and things for holding different kinds of munitions, nuclear and non-nuclear ordinances. But further south, we're getting closer to Hokkaido because the Japanese, obviously, they voiced their concern. SATCOMs, as you just saw there. And then, of course, this next place, training grounds on to the right where the pin is. And then the major facility that they've built on the left there, underground facility here. And you'll see a spot. If you can go just northly, you'll see the fenced in area here. Yep, you got it. If you go in there, this is a brand new facility. We looked at this previously before, but look at how they're bunkered up in there. Look at the revetments. And then look at the way that the entrance of it is double fenced, double walled. And once you get inside the security checkpoints, once you get inside, you're not coming out of there. Are you theorizing?
I think they already got missile launchers in there. That's what's in here.
I'm sure that they do. Yeah, I'm sure that they do.
Because they got radar and stuff already out here.
Yes, and you see how these are subdued. If I guess if you want,
yeah,
if you want to put it that way.
Yeah,
yeah. So, and it's solid concrete that they've poured in there. This is not dirt barriers that they've put up. Of course, what do we have
this
here?
Is missile launchers. You can see them.
This is missile launchers. This is the S-500 site that we looked at before. This is 50 kilometers north of Hokkaido. The Japanese obviously are concerned about this as well, and rightfully so. And you can see they've already got the troops there.
And they don't let nobody in.
No, they do not.
Well, but you see this building here? You got all these buildings, and then in the area we talked about, doesn't that kind of look just like the building we were just looking at?
It certainly does.
Yeah, this is, with all these buildings here, this isn't residential. Those are garages. No. Look at the doors. This is all their storage area here. Wow. So they've let this rot away, and they're replacing each one of them with new. Yeah, so this is how you can tell that the Russians are planning on doing something here. You see the roofs on these buildings, and the roofs on these buildings, and the roofs on these buildings. This is what it used to be. When the Russians become interested, the first thing they do is go back in and put new roofs on everything. And look how new all that is. Yeah, this is more proof that it's all going to be kicking off soon. You want to hit this, Jeff? Or Johnny, I mean.
This is just another underground facility here. You can see multiple entrances at this this intersection. So you got one there, 2 more to the right, 3 more, 4 more. So all double fenced in. Next is going to be this is just the main airfield where everybody comes in when you come down here, because it's literally the halfway point on the island itself. So this is where you're going to land. And then, of course, we've got a training area down here, and you can see where they're training. They're digging out trenches, and they're digging out defensive lines to get people down in to the to the trenches to be able to fortify defense if the Japanese move on this island. So they're getting people ready for it. Two massive underground bunkers to the right there from where you are, right there.
You remember I said the concrete entrance going into the side of the mountain? I showed you up there. Well, look there. That's exact same way.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now, how do we look at this active? Well, we're going to go northwest of here, northwest. And look what we have. It is a drone runway, and you also have places for people to sleep.
Yeah, and hangars. And something really secure right here. Double fenced. There's the entrance. It ramps that right down in. See that?
I do, yeah.
Wow. Yeah, no wonder Japan is freaking out. Well, see, and I was going to mention this earlier. The Japanese know what the Chinese, the North Koreans, and the Russians are doing. So they're aware. So that's why they're so worried. Plus, they got a closer eye on this. All right, so let's go to questions and answers here, folks. So if you got questions, put them in the chat.
Any comments on any of this, Jeff?
No, it's just more grist for the mill if they're preparing for a war, and they're preparing for a war on many fronts with many enemies. And the expense that they go to. It's just unbelievable. No wonder their society is poor.
They've put billions in this infrastructure out here. And this is not the only island that they've put billions into. You look at some of the other islands out here that are just north of Hokkaido, because this is not the only place. Mm-hmm. And they've put so much into it. It's just it baffles the mind. And it's not construction that's happened just in the last 15 to 20 years. It's construction that's happened since the start of the Ukraine invasion, and even after all this money into it.
All right, so Private's asking me if I saw what's going on in Poland. There's a lot of things going on in Poland. You have to be way more specific than that. Poland's a big country, and lots of things. So, I haven't said anything of your weapons north of Japan. I don't think anybody here has.
I did, and the reason I did, if you give me just a second, I will show you where north of Japan, where I believe that they are. I will also point out that the S-500 system, and Jeff, maybe you can elaborate on some of this, the S-300s, the S-400s, and even now the new S-500 systems, these are dual use. So these can carry nuclear warheads, smaller nuclear warheads, but they can carry them.
Mm-hmm.
They're not as accurate. They're more accurate as an anti-air system, but they can hit land-based targets. But you don't have to be accurate with a nuclear warhead, do you?
No, that's the idea. The explosion is so big in the shock wave, you can be off and still get the target. Like what happened at Nagasaki. We didn't hit dead end on the city, but we did a lot of damage anyway.
All right, what are we getting for questions here?
I'm working on the imagery. Give me just a second.
What countries near Japan can be counted on for help against Russia, North Korea, and China? I can't really think of any. Jeff, is anybody major over there you can think of that could come to the aid?
They come to the aid of who?
Japan and South Korea in the event that Russia, China, and North Korea do something.
Well, the country that has the capability to come to the aid of Japan is the United States. I mean, European countries that have naval units might be able to send an aircraft carrier group or something like France or the UK, but they've got their own theater that they're worried about. It would be the United States. That would be Australia doesn't have a significant enough military. They could send a couple submarines or something, but for real significant help, it's really the United States. The Philippines is busy defending its area, and their military isn't, force projection. There's a difference between having a defense, units that can defend your territory and having units that can go hundreds of thousands of miles to protect another country. And if you look at a world map, Japan is in a very odd corner. You get this huge, third of the world's surface area is the Pacific Ocean. And Japan is up in this northwest corner of Asia, or rather, northeast corner of Asia. And it's close to Russia, close to China. Of course, Korea is in between there. And there's not a lot of other major powers nearby. America is the closest, and we still have to go across the Northern Pacific to get there. So Japan is really in a vulnerable position.
Yeah, I think they're in a really bad position.
Yeah, geographically, it's a difficult position because the thing is they're surrounded by water. One of the things is the submarine fleets of North Korea, China, and Russia are 3 times the size of the U.S. submarine fleet. And now anti-submarine warfare is carried out by submarines now, unlike in World War II. And so, and Japan's anti-submarine warfare capabilities, they have some. You got a lot of Chinese air power, North Korean missiles and air power, drones, and Russian drones and air power that can reach Japanese waters. And they've been testing Japanese waters, and Japan can be cut off because its sea lanes can be effectively, look at how they close the Strait of Hormuz with drones. They can close the seaways. Russia and China, I believe, can close the sea avenues into Japan And Japan would take very heavy losses in merchant ships like they did in World War II, trying to supply themselves. Remember that Japan's can only feed about a third of its population from its own food supply because of their size of their population. And so if they can't import, they can't eat. And also with fuel. The other thing is Japan has a large, like I say, around 200 days of fuel. But if drones started attacking that, as we've seen what happens in Russia, fuel stores are very vulnerable to drone attacks. They just blow up and burn. Japan could be crippled fairly easily, which is really frightening. They're just right up against Russia and very close to China, and America's way over on the other side of the Pacific. So yeah, geography is a key thing here.
And not that far from North Korea.
Yes, North Korea. I mean, North Korean semi-submarines, these things come up to the Japanese coast and they kidnap people off of beaches in Japan and take them back into captivity in North Korea, if you can believe it or not. That's how miserable the North Korean government is. So, yeah, Japan is, and South Korea too. I mean, that's another industrial country, North Asian country that's, and its own government has turned leftist. So who knows how long they'll survive with their naive attitude now of their government. But Northeast Asia. And this, by the way, if people think Japan's not important to us, if Japan was swallowed up by Russia and China, or even blockaded, if their economy collapsed, our economy presently, as our dependence is on certain Japanese things that are made over there, machine tools and so on, if they collapsed, our economy would collapse within 2 years because our dependence on their manufacturing.
Now, the reason I sent this, Lee, this is for those that are curious about where nukes are. So we're going to go to the north end of this runway. And what we're going to do is we're going to zoom down.
I know where this is.
Yes, sir. Putin came out here, too, by the way. What we're going to do is we're going to look down the left side of the runway at this airport. Or excuse me, the right side. I'm sorry, the right side. And then what do we have on the runways? Well, we got MiGs.
They've added more.
Yeah.
There weren't this many the last time.
Yes, sir. And if we look on the taxiway, what do we have here?
Yeah. 160.
We have one. We have one. We have two. And then if we go back up the main run, or up the runway to the right, we got three. Keep going north. We got four. We got four Tu-160s out here, four of them. And each one of these are capable of carrying nuclear warheads.
Yeah, and this is that new facility they just built.
That's one of them. The other one is, if you give me just a moment, it's out here. It's not far away.
Yeah, but look at the radar they have down here. I've built this in 3D. I have a complete 3D model of this facility. They've added another radar here. And more military trucks. All this wasn't out here last time.
Yeah, about 10... Oh, there goes Jeff. About 10 kilometers. Is it 10 kilometers? I'm sorry. About 20 kilometers north. So about 10 miles. There's Jeff. They've put this facility in.
Oh, yeah.
And they've massively expanded this.
Yep. This is the same thing that they built in Kaliningrad.
That's right. Same specs.
Yep. And that's a nuclear bunker.
Have nuclear capable craft north of Japan that Putin just went. I'm pointing to this as an example.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, this is definitely nuclear storage. I mean, they even got the towers. Look at that. That's to prevent lightning from hitting your bunkers, people.
Yeah, you don't want lightning hitting a nuclear bomb. You just don't. That's bad.
All right,
question for Jeff. Question for Jeff. You mentioned someone said the communists wanted to take over the U.S. during an economic depression. Do you see this happening before Russia does anything?
It depends. Russia and China have been waiting for us to have this depression, and the Communist Party here, and this is, I heard it from members of the Communist Party USA in the early 1980s, that this was always the plan, because it follows Marx's statement that capitalism, the crisis of capitalism is coming, right? Where you have a depression, you have another Great Depression, and the communists and the Soviets, they always, they were regretted that they weren't ready to do the world revolution when the Great Depression happened. But they want to be able to do this and say, look, the capitalist system has failed. Now you've got to flip over to communism. And this is what the left, the DSA and the Democratic Party in the USA and many of the leftist parties in the world that are infiltrated by communist elements, they're preparing for this. They want to go to full socialism when the next depression hits. The problem is they've been waiting a long time for this, and it hasn't happened. But, we are in a crisis. Our debt can't be repaid. There's massive indebtedness all across the West, Japan, Europe, America. We all have this problem. And so they're hoping for this crisis of capitalism to happen and rescue them from their current situation. But now Russia and China are both in economic crisis, financial crisis, and they're likely to go down and hit the pavement before we do. But yet they've got these mechanisms, these left-wing parties and groups that are really linked to them in the West, Black Lives Matter, Antifa, these groups, and other radical groups, and in Europe, and right-wing groups also to spread the discontent to become active. So it's hard to say how, it's going to happen to us first, and they're going to be able to exploit it, or they're going to go through a crisis and be unable to exploit it. Very hard to say at this point, given the problems that they've generated for themselves, both in China and Russia, with their communist policies. Because socialism doesn't work, and that's been their main problem. They think they can make it work, and that's why they're socialists, but they really haven't been able to perfect that.
Question: do we have bunkers like this in the U.S. and in NATO countries?
Yes.
I'm sure that we do, yes.
We just don't have as many as they do, by the way.
Yes, yes.
They have many times more bunkers in Russia and China of this type than we do.
Question for all: how is Russia able to afford all of the military spending they're doing now?
Their economy works differently. If you were to study like Alec Nove's economic history of the USSR, and then you fast forward to around 1976 when General Keegan of the U.S. Air Force Intelligence goes public and comes on 60 Minutes and says, we've got these satellite, that can penetrate the ground, and we found these massive bunkers in the Soviet Union. Under each major city in the USSR, there are, I forget how many bunkers there were, several bunkers, each one the size of the Pentagon, 400 feet down in the ground, massive underground structures. Then in the 90s, massive structures in the Urals. And I think it was in the 70s that somebody asked Keegan, what did this cost the Russians to build all this underground infrastructure and tunnels? And it was just astronomical by our cost, what it would cost us, astronomical figures. But what Alec Nove would point out is their economy works completely different. The Soviet economy worked by constricting consumer spending and redirecting all the labor and all the capital into military and military infrastructure spending. And that's how they did it. People worked the same, 40 hours a week or whatever. They just got a lot fewer choices as consumers, and consumption was limited, and it was military consumption. And this is how they do it. And China does it to some extent the same way.
And you can see, because of the economic woes in Russia right now, you can see where they're trying to get back to what you're talking about. They're trying to get back to the military spending and then having the lower choices in the consumer economy.
That's right. They're transitioning. It's back to the USSR. And I should point out, people say, well, you hear this all the time, these GDP figures. The Russian GDP is the size of Holland's or whatever, or smaller than Italy's.
Italy,
yeah. The problem with this calculation is that, look, your GDP increases. Let's say you got a guy who has a maid he's paying, right? Let's say he marries his maid. She becomes his wife, so he's no longer paying her. The GDP goes down. So basically, so you have divorce in the West, let's say, and people are living together without being married. All of a sudden, you have this big increase in GDP. It's not a real increase in terms of manufacturing or your capabilities of building things, because all you've done is you've got more service industry jobs and more people doing things that they did for free before, but they're being paid for it. And now it's just added to the economy. It's not real. So there's something really fundamentally wrong with the way we calculate economic wherewithal in the West. You know, the idea that the U.S. economy, look, we can't build ships the way the Chinese can. We don't have the industrial capacity even of Russia. Now we have more sophisticated things we build, but there's no, you're comparing apples and oranges. What they build is different, but they build more. Look at North Korea produced more ammunition last year than the US did, right? So how do you measure these things? I think that it's really complicated. And I think that as a short answer is, Russia has a much larger manufacturing capacity than we realize, and much more capability. It's just that they have so much stealing, so much corruption, and inefficiencies on the management level, where they trample down the people who work under them, and they lose efficiencies, that they lose a lot in the process. But they can do these amazing things, like have this massive underground infrastructure, build missiles like crazy, stockpile atomic weapons. There's certain things which, by the way, if they're willing to use those kind of weapons, they can actually beat us under certain circumstances. This is where the West, we can't. And now you look at us in the Middle East, we run out of missiles. And like Hegseth said, oh, no, we're not going to run out of missiles. Well, we are. And you had last weekend major articles coming out saying U.S. conventional deterrence versus China and Russia is now negated by what we've expended in Iran. Very serious that we don't have this manufacturing capacity, because in any war lasting more than a few days or a month, we're suddenly running out. And here Russia has sustained a war for almost 5 years. It's 5.5 years now. 4.5 years now in Ukraine. We cannot sustain that same kind of war. And now we're seeing it. And now we're realizing, oh my gosh, we're in trouble. Same thing applies to Europe.
12 years.
That's true. Well, the Donbass war was much smaller. So it wasn't on this scale that they're fighting now. And when they mobilize 800,000 men, the scale is going to become even more incomprehensibly large. Just think, in World War II, you had on the Russian front, maybe 3 million Germans and maybe 4 or 5 million Russians, maybe 6 million Russians. I think at the max it was 10 million under arms, and they fought continuously for more than 3 years. And both sides were able to keep up with the ammunition needs, both Germany and Russia, because Russia was getting lend-lease from the U.S. And the U.S. was fighting two-front war in the Pacific, and for those 3.5 years, whatever, in the Pacific and in Europe. So just think about it. And a naval war, air war, land war, and the whole thing was completed in less than 4 years for us. So just think about that. And now we can't even sustain, a matter of weeks fighting Iran without running out. Our industrial base has been exported to, China, the Philippines, Mexico, India, and it will take us years to rebuild it.
Question: what would a post-World War III look like back to the Stone Age? I can only make one recommendation. Get this book.
Get
and
what
it will tell
book?
you.
Back to the Stone Age?
No, Origins of the Fourth World War,
Oh.
the one that you wrote.
Oh, the one I wrote. Yes.
Yeah.
If
that
they
book.
have, of course, that book postulates the notion taken from V.D. Sokolovsky's and other Soviet military writers, the idea that they will do an all-out nuclear war because it doesn't, that war does not destroy the environment as some people think. I mean, there will be some areas where there'll be desertification and there will be a lot of loss of the ecological system, but the world will not die from that. And we've got studies that were done, especially fallout studies in the 70s and 80s, that show this, that everybody ignored. And this idea of nuclear winter is completely bogus. It's the same, nuclear winter is the same modeling, environmental modeling, as you have in, and that was bragged about in the New York Times, that you have with global warming science. And it's just bogus science created by the KGB and put on the West, starting with nuclear winter and then going on to using those same models for global warming to damage us. Because if we believe these models, we won't prepare for a nuclear war because, we blow up this many nuclear, it's nuclear winter and everybody freezes and dies. So no reason to prepare for that. So that was the purpose of it. They knew they could, if they got a supremacy, nuclear supremacy, that would give them victory in a war. Just like in World War II, we defeated Japan by having nuclear supremacy, even atomic supremacy. So this is the key thing that we don't understand. We failed to understand. So, and so what would it be like? Well, the Australian government did a study and they said, after a full-blown hydrogen bomb war in the Northern Hemisphere, there would be an increase in leukemias and cancers in Australia from the long-term fallout. But the overall cancer rate in Australia would go down because it would cut off tobacco imports from the United States. That's just gives you an idea. And the overall long-term fallout hazard from a full-blown hydrogen bomb war now in the 21st century would produce less long-term hazard than the above-ground atomic bomb tests of the 40s and 50s did in the 60s. And we had an increase in the cancer rate in the 60s because of those bomb tests. But it isn't going to exterminate us. We didn't get exterminated in the 1960s, Many of us had happy childhoods in the 1960s. So it didn't, there were people I knew, kids I knew that got cancer in their teens. And that was, I suspect, was due to atomic testing, because those kids I knew, they partly grew up in Nevada. And that's where a lot of that atomic stuff was.
Let me see. Question. What is the prediction of where this will jump off? Russia, China? I don't know that. Iran, North Korea, to be the launch point, and what will they hit first to bring NATO or to bring in NATO or the United States? Don't make predictions. I don't know. I cannot say. But what I can say is what we show and what we talk about here, we can show what they are preparing for, and we can kind of give a good estimate as to their timelines that we see and we hear this put out by public information. That's what I can say. I can also say that the Russians, as to their mobilization, we can look at the training areas. Specifically, we can point to the training areas in Belarus and all up and down the eastern NATO border. We can see what they're doing in these training areas. We can see how many people they're moving through these training areas and specifically what they're training for. We can also see, per the Russian press, we can see that they're drilling in several different regions throughout Russia. They're drilling for mass mobilization. They're getting the community centers, they're getting the schools, they're getting the gymnasiums, they're getting all the personnel, the recruiters, the police, they're taking over churches to drill, getting masses of people together for mass mobilization.
And they're bringing foreign workers into Russia to replace the men, which is something that Germany did in World War II when most of its men were mobilized for war. they brought workers from other countries over to work their farms and their, carry on jobs that were not specialized.
Lots of North Koreans are flowing into Russia to do that too.
And by the way, Japan used Koreans as workers as their men were mobilized for war during World War II. So this is an indication of mass mobilization. In World War II, all the major powers mass mobilized. And in what we did in the U.S. is women went to work. So we got we brought a lot of people don't realize a lot of Mexicans came into the United States during World War II. In fact, it was later, a lot of them didn't leave. They tolerated them coming in illegally because we needed the labor. But the Eisenhower administration had this great big operation to round up the Mexicans and send them back to Mexico. So we had women working, we had Mexicans coming into work. So this is how countries cope. And Russia's been recruiting people from India, from the third world to come in and work. Yeah, they're preparing a mass mobilization. Well, how much can they mobilize if they succeed? Well, when it was the USSR and it was twice as big, the USSR had about twice the population of Russia today. The USSR could mobilize 30 million men. So I would say, without question, that the Russian Federation, if it organizes this correctly, could mobilize 10 million men, which was the number I think the U.S. mobilized during World War II. And we're not capable of mobilizing but a fraction of that now. And so that puts them, if they have the weapons to match that mobilization, and the Chinese industrial capacity is astonishing in what the weapons they can produce. If they can equip all that, Europe and the Middle East and North America, we're all in trouble, because they could, if they used atomic weapons in front of a mass like that, they could take over whole continents. And this is what Sokolovsky's method of waging war, this was his theory of how you do it.
Question, do you think Russia and Belarus will make a move soon? I think we just answered that. Can you guys give, you can probably answer this, Lee. Can you guys address the data center growth? Who and what are they tracking? Ring surveillance systems, email data, and how concerned should we be?
Who do they track? Everybody. What do they track? Everything. Are they monitoring and watching everything you're doing each day? No. They're just putting it into a giant database, so if they need it, they can go back and look at it. Now, if you're on a list, like myself and Johnny and probably some others, well, then they pay a little more close attention to you. But everybody else is pretty much just a blip in the machine, and it's not paying attention to you. It's just logging what's taking place. The data centers are growing. They're doing massive amounts of AI to counter the fact that the U.S. doesn't have the industrial capacity to produce chips, computers, processors, all of those things. Elon Musk is now building the largest building in the world in Texas, not far from my house. And that building will be 10 times larger than the largest building that Elon Musk has already built. And this is a joint effort between Tesla and SpaceX, and they are going to build everything that it takes to build robots, satellites, electric cars, batteries, computers, computer chips, the frames. That facility will produce everything from the raw element to the finished product. And that's what Elon has envisioned now, and they're actually starting to build it in Texas. And in fact, back, I'm going to try and show you how big it is. It's like
question. How can Russia fight Japan when they're getting their butts handed to them by Ukraine?
Hold on, Johnny.
Well,
Jeff, you had something to say?
No, no.
Okay. All right, go ahead, Johnny. Sorry.
Right. How can they fight, or how can Russia fight Japan when they're getting their butts handed to them by Ukraine? Well, if you look at the firepower that the Russians have out there, and that's just on one island. That's just one little area north of Japan, specifically Hokkaido. We've also gone and we've looked at what they've got on the east coast of Russia. So down around Vladivostok and working all the way up the coast. They've got even more firepower there. If we look at the air bases that are within what we say, Lee, was it 2,000 kilometers strike distance from Japan? Yep. So it's right at the limit of where the Tu-22s, the Tu-160, well, the Tu-160s can go further, and they've got bomber bases full of bear bombers, Tu-95s out there as well. So how can they do that? They have a lot in reserve out there. And we've also shown, if we look at places like Khabarovsk and others, the Russians have tens of thousands of vehicle stores out there. Tens of thousands. They've got tanks, they've got BMPs, they've got personnel carriers, they've got trucks, they've got engineering units, anything you can imagine, artillery. They've got thousands upon thousands upon thousands of vehicle stores out there that have not been moved west for the Ukraine conflict. So how can they do that? They've got masses of stuff and masses of firepower and all the warheads you can imagine out in the Far East where the Ukrainians cannot hit. Do you have a different take on that, Jeff?
The question contains some of these questions contain this idea that why Russia is if they're getting defeated in Ukraine, how can they expect to win against Japan? And I think there's a misunderstanding both about Russian history. I said in the origins of the Fourth World War that Russia is this old reptile that can take a licking and keep on ticking and eventually, chomp down its foes. Russian military thinking, if you read Sokolovsky, who's their grand strategist who put together this book with a team of military writers in the 1960s that became the Bible for preparing for World War III, you realize that the two most important things in war, at the beginning they explain it's mass mobilization. You have to mobilize tens of, that's the Rand Corporation translation of it. There's two translations. To mobilize, millions of men. China and Russia that's what they're preparing to do. But to do that, you have to configure your economies and your society, and you have to bring up the mobilization. Well, as Colonel Lunev has explained, and a lot of the Soviet military writers hint at, surprise is the number one in a world nuclear war. Surprise is the number one advantage you want, because nuclear weapons are fast. You launch a missile in Russia in less than 30 minutes. In 20-something minutes, it's landing in the United States. You launch a cruise missile with a nuclear warhead from off the Pacific or Atlantic coast, it's going to reach its targets within minutes, right? And you can't stop that. And you can get through the defenses if you attack satellites. We have DPS satellites. We've got satellites that track things. If those satellites are blinded, an attack could come in the first moment we would know we were under attack is when our ground sensors registered the nuclear strikes. And that might be too late, because that might signify the wiping out of our ground deterrent and the wiping out of the aircraft that send the signals to our submarines, giving them the launch codes. Because our submarines with our boomers in the oceans, they can't launch our nuclear weapons without the code. We have to send the code from places in the United States that could be bombed. And if they're bombed and the code can't be sent, guess what? They can't launch the nuke. So that could be a decapitating strike, first strike. So surprise is the key. But the dead giveaway is because they don't believe a nuclear war is just strikes, because they believe that the strikes have to be followed up by ground invasions involving masses of troops. This is one thing, even Peter Pry didn't understand this until I said, look, talk to Stan Lunev. I was really surprised that Peter, for example, didn't understand that. And he said, oh my gosh, you're right. Because I bothered to read that literature. The mobilization gives the whole game away. All the things we're looking at in terms of the infrastructure building, the nuclear bunkers and all these bases and the massive, the tunnels in the nuclear bunkers along the frontier with NATO, in Belarus and Russia. It's just, this is what this is to survive the counterstrike. That's even part of it. So the two key things are they have to get their people, the Russian people, in a mindset that they're headed for a world war. And this is the Russian media. We see it in their television program. They're talking about war constantly and world war, and that they're really fighting NATO and the United States. They're orienting their people. This is number one. Orienting them to who their enemy is. Look, most Americans are disoriented. They don't know that Russia's the enemy. They're saying, oh, this is just, warmongering. Russia's not our enemy. China's not our... No, it's very clear in Russia and China. They're telling their people, and there were banners in China a few years ago saying, keep your lips shut. Don't let them know, basically. Don't let them know we're telling you who the enemy is. And you saw there was a time on Chinese media where they're saying, oh, they're getting ready for war against America. You won't see that on there anymore on social media, but we had that for a couple of years. They are getting ready. And the other thing is the getting ready is so massive. How do they hide it? They hide it in plain sight. We're watching these preparations and nobody's interpreting it as a preparation for World War III against us. They've got this war in Ukraine, which is the word is maskirovka in Russian. It's maskirovka. And the best translation of maskirovka would be psychological camouflage. It's not an exact translation, but it's what it really means. They do things in a way that you can see it in plain sight, but you have a psychologically different interpretation. Your context for what they're doing is wrong. Oh, they're fighting Ukraine. Oh, they're intimidated by the West. NATO's expanded to the east. They keep emphasizing this. That is deception. They're planning an offensive war. They're not worried about defending. They know we're not going to attack them. We're interested in peace. Our societies aren't interested in starting a nuclear war. Their society isn't either, but their leadership is, right? So they're using this to mask their preparation. So we're saying, oh, they're just trying to trying to fight Ukraine. And the same thing with the Chinese. The Chinese are worried about Taiwan. They're going to invade Taiwan. They're worried about India. No, they're preparing for war against the U.S.
Question: are you guys expecting an uptick in sabotage? Yes. Read this book.
Yes.
Spetsnaz.
Yeah.
By Viktor Suvorov. Yes. You will
and
see
assassinations in Western countries, which are, they've been assassinating key economic people in Germany to prevent the arms buildup in Germany.
Yes. And that's still an ongoing thing. You've got heads of defense contractors now that have round-the-clock security teams with them.
Yeah, because the Russians will murder them.
And a Russian was just arrested a couple of days ago for an assassination plot in Germany, wasn't it?
Poland.
Okay, yep.
Yes. Okay, next question. Do you think Putin is confident the U.S. will be reluctant to be a lead player if he attacks Europe? Well, they're trying. They want to get the U.S. out of NATO. And with the current administration's stance and the continued rhetoric, I think if they could pull out of it, they probably would. But I don't think that's not a possibility for them.
It's politically, because of the Republicans in the Senate, it's too dangerous for the administration. Right. They would probably suffer impeachment, as the Republicans and Democrats in the Senate would get together, and there's definitely the Democrats are going to win the House in the fall, and they would impeach the president, and then the Senate would convict him and remove him. And they could do that to the vice president too if he persists in those kind of policies. The vice president even says there's nothing wrong now with getting rid of the dollar as the reserve currency of the world, which would destroy our economy. So these people, these leaders we have now, they're incompetent. This president and vice president and their top officials. I don't know how we got such clowns, but we did.
Question: what's wrong with the AfD party in Germany? You have to go back to earlier when we were talking about it at the beginning of the broadcast. But this is a party that's owned lock, stock, and barrel by Moscow. That's the problem with it.
Full of
and you
Russian
have
agents, yeah.
Full of Russian agents.
And
you've got
Chinese agents. I think that one co-head
Chinese-
of the party, she lived in China.
What's her name?
They had a nickname for her.
Vital. Alice Vital is her name.
Yeah. What was her nickname in China? I forget. She
I
had a
don't know.
nickname. Yeah, they had a funny nickname for her that was characterized. She's a lesbian, right?
Was it Vital? Yeah, was it Vital or Vic? No,
Yeah,
it was
yeah,
Vital.
that's who it is. Yeah.
Alice
Uh-huh.
Vital. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, next question. How soon will the new Russian recruits be ready to take Russia to train strategically? Well, they've got the training areas right on the border. That's the first thing.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing, which will take them no time, they're already training them. They're already equipping them, and they're already positioning them strategically all up and down NATO's eastern flank. We've seen that from all the imagery that we've shown. How soon will the new recruits be combat ready following the September mobilization? Lee, you track how they train them in these facilities. Would you like to comment?
First off, they're already trained. The 800,000 that they're calling up are already trained, along with
they just need a refresher, right?
They just need to be issued the weapons. I mean,
so just put forward deployed by the training facilities, and that's it.
And told where they're going to show up, and then deploy out from there. So the 800,000 are already trained. This is what we've been watching. The training facilities have been operating for over a year that we've been talking about this, and they've ran those 800,000 already through there. They're just calling up people that are already trained.
So I've got a theory about this, and we'll see if it plays out in reality. Looking at the special military operation that they, back in 2021 and 2022, they began the deployments. Actually, they began preparing in August of 2021. And, we were watching them do this, and it became obvious by November. It was obvious they were intending to invade all out in Ukraine. And the U.S. military warned the Ukrainian leadership about this at the time. And I think that a similar process, if they're mobilizing in November, you can count the months. And I think that they will be ready with this new mass of troops. And I think there might be additional mobilizations in the immediate months to follow this 800,000. They will be ready, I think, around the beginning of winter. And I think that the timing of it, why didn't they begin this in July when summer was still going on? I think they are going to be careful and deliberate in what they're doing. They're going to threaten NATO and make NATO afraid and intimidated, but they're going to focus on collapsing Ukraine because they're going to do what Sergei Lavrov has said. They've got this method. They're going to destroy Ukraine's power grid, freeze them out when the morale is collapsing. And I do think they have some kind of new drone and maybe anti-drone technology they're going to deploy, and they're going to double up on Ukraine to collapse it during the winter. I think that is their strategy. And then they're going to immediately shift to NATO's border for next spring to then go into Europe.
I think if we also look at
my guess.
I think if we look at what the Belarusians have done to their southern border with the northern border of Ukraine,
yes,
and then we look at what Lukashenko's been saying over the last 2 or 3 weeks, saying we're going to be putting all the ones that are, how did he put it, ill trained or ill equipped or whatever, we're going to be putting you as a punishment down there on the border. And then of course you got the concrete blocks factory, you got the gravel, the stone quarries that they've put in right on the Pripyat Marsh. You've got the Ukrainians. We've looked at the Ukrainian side of the Belarusian border, specifically north of Chernihiv Oblast, and you see what the defensive measures the Ukrainians are taking on their side, blowing up bridges, cutting defensive lines, putting in anti-tank ditches, dropping trees, all of these things.
Laying mines and having drones in preparation to strike them on those narrow roads. I should point out that Ukraine is defending this Pripyat Marsh front in the north with very small formations of troops, very few troops, just troops that would delay bottlenecks until they could get reserves there. So because Ukraine's army, the limited size they have, that would stretch them if the Russians and Belarusians got through the swamp to the other side and had a good enough logistics net, like by building roads. They would compromise Ukraine's flank to such an extent without having the brigades needed to cover that front. There's a good chance that the Ukrainians cannot hold. And if the Russians can tip the scales in the drone war in any degree significant enough to chip the balance with their numbers, Ukraine will not be able to cope. This is the danger. I mean, the Russians and the Belarusians might just be slaughtered coming across, but it might work this time. It really might. And if it does work, the Russian plan is that all of the Ukrainians, as aka Soviet citizens who are in rebellion, they have a choice. They'll be under sentence of death, which they can work off by joining the new Soviet or Union military, and they will then incorporate the remains of the Ukrainian army into the Russian, Belarusian armies. And that would add another 700,000 troops to what would already be close to 2 million. Well, I think over 2 million. So then you'd be talking with more mobilizations, 3 million men, which is what they'd need to invade Europe. And that would be unstoppable, really. At least immediately unstoppable. They would be able to drive deep into Europe then.
And at this point, if that were to happen, you would see the drone technology, the anti-drone technology, would be in Russian hands at that point. And you can see what the Ukrainians have done just in the exercises that we've brought them over for and included them in.
Yeah, if you combine, and I think the Russians are about to upgrade their drone game. I think what Lee said was right about the Spetsnaz training. This is very important.
They just skipped. I don't know if you've heard this, Lee. The Russians have just skipped a generation in their Jiran drone program. They have jumped ahead one generation for the new jet drones.
Yes.
And the jet drones are, again, upping your game. And of course, the Chinese have been working on supersonic drones that can carry micronuclear warheads. And of course, why would they make a drone that could carry a micronuclear warhead? Because they don't intend to use nukes, right? This is the key that a lot of people are missing in this whole thing. They do intend to do that. And so you're talking about, with their industrial capacity to build drones, both Iran, Russia, and China are mass producing drones. And the West is way behind in this. We're only now beginning to spend billions this year, budgeted for billions to be spent on drones. And we never have before. This isn't true in Russia, China, and Iran.
Yeah, we were spending billions before, but we were only buying a couple drones.
No, actually, we were only spending hundreds of millions, is my understanding.
No, I'm talking about. I was talking about with like Global Hawk and those aircraft. We've spent billions, but we have very few of them.
Oh, billions over many years.
Yeah. We've already spent billions, but
billions within 1 year. I think they've budgeted 20-something billion now to spend in this fiscal year, which is what they need to do to catch up. But then how long? I mean, you might know better than me. How long before we're gonna be able to catch up on this drone stuff? We got to train people. We got to build the drones. You know, how long is this going to take us?
I think we can do it pretty quick because we've actually got a bunch of drones that the Ukrainians are using now.
And we are working with the Ukrainians
yes.
now for the first time. Finally. Hegseth saying, "Oh, we don't need them." Now we are working with them, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
We're finally. Now that they kicked our ass in an exercise.
Yeah.
Yes, very badly.
Yeah, and that's very dangerous.
They destroyed an entire armored division in no time.
They destroyed one
in minutes.
In minutes.
Oh,
they
good
did this
grief!
In Germany.
Oh, good grief!
It was so bad, Jeff, that the units themselves had to be respawned.
It was worse than the Germans rolling over the Poles on horseback in what 1935, 39. I can't remember what year it was, but it's way worse than that. They wiped us out in no time at all. If you went to lunch and you came back, all your guys were dead.
Actually, the Polish cavalry, they didn't fight on horseback. They dismounted to fight, and they were pretty good. But yeah, the Poles did not have adequate anti-tank weapons or an adequate tank. In fact, their tank forces were deployed on the Romanian border during the invasion, so they were not in the right place. But in 1939, but yeah.
I'll send you the after action report on what happened in Germany.
So I heard General Zaluzny has been given some speeches and talking about NATO's unpreparedness, and he said that NATO is way behind, of course, Ukraine, and also way behind Russia. That Russia's new techniques, developing techniques, would also destroy the NATO forces, which is really terrifying.
Right. Next question. Why would the U.S. not be able to mobilize 10 million men? We can, and they're actually running the selective service in the United States. They're actually running computer simulations on how to do this. But I think it goes back to Jeff's point. We're not oriented to this. The Russians and the Chinese are beginning to orient their people, and they have been orienting them to the coming conflict. We're not doing that.
I think that it's really... I don't believe we could mobilize 10 million men now, because psychologically, millions would run away to Canada.
Well, I don't think we'd want to.
Canada's under threat too. So
others would be, it would be stupid. But look, I'll tell you, when I taught high school, they wouldn't stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. This is back in 1989 when things weren't as bad as they are now. I had a senior, was my homeroom class, seniors who wouldn't stand for they just yapped through the Pledge of Allegiance. And I said, I noticed you're not standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. What if the country were bombed and invaded by the Chinese? And this one boy said, well, my mom says if there's a war, I'm going to Canada. And all the boys said, yeah, I'm going to Canada. I mean, it was 100%. And I said, well, how do you girls feel about being left behind to be raped by the Chinese soldiers? And the next morning they were doing the Pledge of Allegiance because nobody had explained it to them before. But I think because people are so disoriented in the U.S., and also we have an obesity problem. 43% of the population is obese, and I think it's over 70% are overweight. And you have, they're psychologically not suited to be trained as soldiers. So we don't have the pool of manpower that we had in World War II. And so I think that could be a problem. And also we don't have the weapons. We don't have I was discussing this with some Canadian and U.S. General officers a year ago, September, and they said, Trump can try to rebuild the military if he gets elected, but the problem is that we don't have an industrial base either in Canada or the U.S. or Europe to equip. If we mobilize 10 million men, we wouldn't have weapons for that many, because it's going to take us to 2029, 2030 before we have the industrial base back to be able to equip a force that large.
It also makes you wonder about the Europeans too. And I say that because the Europeans are not just one specific country. They're walking into their old Cold War arms manufacturing plants, and they're finding that the machinery in there, it's all ruined.
It's ruined.
They're going to have to retool. Yeah, they're going to have to retool and do all this all over again from scratch. And with the dwindling industrial base, the energy prices that have gone up and the businesses that have gone to China, this has become a national defense and a national security issue. You have to go, don't you, Jeff? You have a...
No, I do have to go.
Okay.
I have to go in 5 minutes. So
okay, so we'll burn through the rest of these questions. No more questions, please, because Jeff has to go. Lee, could you repeat?
I wanted to actually.
Go ahead.
Once Jeff goes, I still wanted to go through this satellite imagery we had. If you want to do that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we can do that.
So we'll do that after Jeff goes. All right, go ahead with the questions.
Okay. Question for you, Lee. Could you repeat what you were referring to when you said NATO would announce a war situation in 2 weeks? What exactly did you mean by that?
I said that NATO, that's not exactly what I said. What I said is that NATO believes that Russia could be capable of launching an attack against a NATO country or the Baltics within 2 weeks. So they are within 2 weeks of being able to launch some type of an attack. And I want to refer back to the draft. I don't think it would ever happen. And that's because wars now are blitzkrieg. Major things can happen in minutes. The Chinese could get into our grid and black out the entire grid with a keystroke. They could take out transformers. They could take out other SCADA communication systems. They could take out our water supply. There's a lot of things that the Russians and the Chinese and the North Koreans and the Iranians are planning to do to the West, be it Europe.
They could launch drone swarms from Mexico and Cuba.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And, you know, or even Canada. Hell, they could even bring containers into our ports full of drones and leave them there because the ports in the United States are mainly controlled by China. So who are we to know what they're even bringing in and stacking in our own ports right now? And so to call up a draft, to get the people to be to the training area, to train them and do all that, this ain't like World War II. This is going to be a blitzkrieg war like we've never seen before. And I don't think if it comes to the point of where we need those troops to be called up, we won't have the time to train them to get there, because we don't train troops like Russians do. Russians will let you shoot a gun 5 times and look at the gun for a little bit, and 2 days later, that's your gun while you go marching off towards the front. The other problem is that 80% of Russian troops coming to the front line in Ukraine are dead before they get within 6 miles of the front. 80%.
The Russians believe in traditionally in an 8-week training time for a soldier, but that might be adequate for an army of riflemen massed in World War I type situation. But of course, in modern warfare, it's really not the kind of training you want. But with our highly trained forces, after the first minutes, like you say in this blitzkrieg, they will kill off a lot of our trained people, so we'll be in the same position they will. So it's like an equalizing of the battlefield. And I want to say one more thing about what you just said, Lee, about them being able to attack in 2 weeks. Just because they can doesn't mean they will, and I'll tell you why. Because their tradition, their military doctrine is, in this pre-war phase, to take on one enemy at a time. And in World War II, they did it. They didn't attack Finland and Poland at the same time. As soon as they got done with Poland, they attacked Finland. Then the next year, they attacked the Baltic states. And after the Baltic states were done, they went into Romania, and then of course they went into Persia. So they don't take on more than one project at once. And
I think that the project that they're going to take on is Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia.
Yeah, and I think it will be after Ukraine collapses. Once Ukraine has collapsed,
they
will move on those countries.
I don't think they're going to wait that long. And the reason I
think they will wait.
Yeah, the reason I don't think they're going to wait is, number one, they're losing in Ukraine right now. They're not gaining anything in Ukraine. They're losing more men than Ukraine is losing, and they're not holding territory. And the average time that a Russian lives on the Ukrainian front line from the time that a Ukrainian drone detects him is 25 minutes. 80% are being killed before they even get to the front line, and the remaining 20% are killed within 25 minutes of the time that they're detected. And the Russians can't, the Russians have failed to meet their goals as far as being able to replace the men on the front as fast as the Ukrainians are killing them. So the actual number of Russians on the front with Ukraine is dropping. Additionally, Putin is having problems at home. He's had to steal property from oligarchs. Some of the oligarchs were worth billions of dollars, and they got 7 cents on the dollar for every dollar they had in. They only got 7 cents on a dollar. Another oligarch only got 3 cents on the dollar. And Putin is taking their assets, He's preventing people from taking money out of banks. They're doing all kinds of things to get money in. Additionally, Putin is telling the banks, you have to extend this money to these people. You have to extend money to those people to continue to keep the military machine going. And the people inside Russia that I'm talking to are telling me that Putin has to pivot. If Putin wants to stay in power, he has got to pivot and go into the Baltics or go somewhere else. The Ukrainian war has gotten so stagnant that the people are getting mad and they want a victory. And Putin thinks that the only way that he can get that victory is to take something other than Ukraine, because he knows he's stalled in that quagmire. And so he has been building up to take the Baltics. And everybody over there is telling me he's going to take the gap.
Yeah, I think that's a deception to intimidate Europe. There's no way that he will attack Europe before he's finished off Ukraine. And if you think he's stalled in Ukraine, the special military operation may be viewed as follows. It's an ethnic cleansing and getting rid of your social undesirables war. He has been purposely killing off criminals, socially, older people, Muslims, people in his population that he wants to get rid of. So I think they've been culling the herd, so to speak. And
exactly. That's why they only get 2 days. That's why they only get 2 days of training before they're sent to the front.
Well, that's intentional. I think they're purposely using these people to kill them because they know that the conditions that are going to exist in the world are going to be so difficult that they won't be able to feed everybody once the world war starts. So, all right, who are the useless eaters? Let's send them to the front now and get them killed. So I think there's a social engineering going on, and I do not believe there is no wisdom in it. If you are failing in Ukraine, you don't start another failing campaign in Baltics. They will go against Ukraine with new tools, and they will either defeat Ukraine or they'll fail, because they're not going to take on another war when this war is not completed. This is strategic. This is not how they handle things. All communist countries would view that as adventurism, which is strictly prohibited in strategic thought. Everyone would be against it. So I don't believe for a minute that Putin is going to open a war against NATO before he's finished the war in Ukraine. But as soon as he, by the way, said so. If he's stuck in Ukraine, he won't win against NATO. He won't.
Lavrov already said they're going to. So
they're going to what?
Lavrov has already said, and in fact, he just did it again the other day in another interview that he did, but he said over 6 months ago that Russia does not believe that NATO will protect the Baltic states, that NATO doesn't have what it takes to protect the Baltic states, and he said Russia has that theory and we're going to test that theory.
And you believe him, this liar? You believe him. It's strategic misdirection.
Okay, I've been tracking Russian movements on the battlefield since August of 2014. Mm-hmm. I predicted the invasion into Ukraine to within 24 hours of when it would take place, more than a week in advance. I had hundreds of television cameras and video cameras all the way around the area, watching the Russians build up before they did it, and even tracked individual vehicles along the border as they moved. What I am seeing right now in Belarus, Kaliningrad, Western Russia, and the response that I'm seeing from Poland is the exact same thing that the Russians did before they went into Ukraine. They would not have moved. They would not be building up 100 military bases and 20 airfields in Kaliningrad, Western Belarus, and Western Russia if they weren't planning on moving that way.
That's not necessarily true. Having those forces positioned against NATO prevents NATO from intervening in Ukraine when Ukraine is collapsing.
NATO cannot intervene in Ukraine.
How can you answer me this? Move. Their forces can achieve results without having to act or attack. And they achieve the result by sitting on the NATO countries, and the NATO countries then have to position themselves to defend the Baltic states and will not be ready to prevent the Ukraine's collapse when they begin their big attack on Ukraine. This is my theory. This is how I interpret it.
NATO has no authority nor will to go against Russia with Ukraine.
The Russians don't believe. Look, nobody knows what the reaction in Europe will be if Ukraine starts to collapse. There will be predictably a big debate in Europe over whether to send troops to prevent the collapse of Ukraine. This is human nature. They will see that Ukraine's collapse. You may say that, but the Russians want to be sure that won't happen. And their way of being sure is to have a threat against the Baltic states and Poland.
They do. They've got
military
everything
common
that's
sense. Russia cannot rely on the goodwill of Europe not intervening in Ukraine, or that their institutions will suddenly, prove as, if you were to predict before 2022 Europe's reaction to the Ukraine invasion, would you have predicted the kind of response to supporting Ukraine that we saw? No, I wouldn't have predicted it.
I would have predicted that the U.S. would have helped more than they did.
What?
I would have predicted that the U.S. would have helped more than we did.
But you wouldn't have predicted that Europe would have pulled together and withstood the threat of nuclear war from Russia, because Russia was threatening Europe with nuclear war if they did anything to help Ukraine.
Yeah, but that's what Kaliningrad is Russia's threat of nuclear war in Europe.
No, nuclear weapons is the threat of nuclear war.
This is my question. Kaliningrad has not attacked anybody in this war. And nobody has attacked Kaliningrad in this war. So if there's no threat to Kaliningrad, there has not been a threat to Kaliningrad, why are they covering all of Kaliningrad in anti-drone nets? Why are they
eventually going to? They don't know what NATO's going to do. NATO could decide to intervene in Ukraine if Ukraine starts to collapse.
Under what article can NATO intervene in Ukraine?
You don't have to use a NATO article to intervene. That's a myth. Countries based on their own national interest can decide on war without having to have some kind of treaty in advance.
Okay, so then that's not NATO. My point is...
No, it's not. But NATO would be dragged in.
How can NATO be dragged in?
I would just like to point out that there is and there has been a public plan put forth by Sweden to take Kaliningrad if necessary.
Right, but that's not NATO.
Yeah, because
Sweden is
a NATO
No, it's not. It's a NATO country. You're missing the point.
They don't have to act as NATO. They can act as their own.
Okay,
you can have a number of European countries decide to intervene without consulting NATO, because guess what? They have sovereignty.
Okay, and so at what point have any of those countries done that so far?
None of them.
There hasn't been a crisis that needed to.
Well, during their first invasion, everybody thought that Ukraine was going to fall in 3 days, and nobody did anything.
Look! I have to go, but
I understand.
This is the way I view it. Anyway, I've got to go, guys.
All right. Well, thank you for being here. We greatly appreciate it.
You bet. All right. Bye-bye.
Yep. Bye-bye. All right. Where are we at?
Well, there was that.
Yeah. Well, I don't see. People
I see
say
both your points.
People say NATO. NATO is an organization. You have to be specific. You have to say a NATO member could, but not NATO as a whole. NATO has no directive. NATO has no capability. NATO has no aggressive or active ability to go in and attack any other nation. In fact, in all of NATO's history, they've only been called in once or twice, and that was the UN doing it. And so they operated under a UN directive. So I from somebody who worked with NATO and DOD and trained NATO troops, NATO is very restricted in what they can do. And like when I
think the last time
spoke to a leader, he said we're a defensive organization, not an offensive organization.
Yeah, I think the last time, and correct me if I'm wrong, please. The last time that Article 5 was invoked was after 9/11. Is that correct?
Right. The U.S. did.
Right. Right.
That's the only
that
time. That's the
yeah,
only time Article 5 has ever been invoked.
Right. 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 Next question. Does the U.S. know what's going on with Canada with their government? Is their government seating? Is that
Yes.
government is seating the CCP with in the Parliament? Yes.
They're doing
Yes,
the same
they're
thing in
aware
the U.S.
Yes, they are. Look at the DSA.
Right.
Johnny, Jeff, since Jeff's not here, have either of you seen Jonathan Fink's recent interview with Constantine since his hospitalization? I have not seen it, no. I try to keep up on what Constantine does, but I just haven't had time recently. I've been very busy. I do apologize, but I will get to it at some point, I'm sure.
Yeah, I've been busy, so I haven't seen it.
Yeah. Let me see. When do you think the World War III will kick off on the ground, or kick off on a ground war in Europe? I think we've pretty much covered that.
They're working. The Russians have already started. Everybody else hasn't woken up yet. You got to understand, more than 150 locations since February of 2022 through February of 2026. In a 4-year period, over 150 locations were hit by Russian sabotage, and those 150 are proven. That doesn't count the hundreds that haven't been proven yet. Those 150 have been proven. So Russia is already at war with Europe and the West. We just are letting it happen and not saying anything about it because we don't want to get into a war. So it's kind of like when you go somewhere and there's a belligerent guy at the bar and he talks shit about you and pokes at you for a while until he really does something, you're not going to deck him. But that's where we are right now. The Russians are the belligerent drunkard in the bar talking shit. And they're going to talk shit as long as they're allowed to. Next question.
Right, that was it on questions. Can we get to the imagery?
Sure, that is right here.
Okay, the first image we see here. This is a result of a Ukrainian drone attack on the port of Novorossiysk 3 nights ago. This was an LNG tanker that was struck. And for you to clarify, Lee, I don't know what the intention was here other than the ship, the fuck, because I don't know.
They could have either been doing that or going for the wheelhouse on the ship.
Okay. Well,
into the superstructure, or it could have gotten caught up in something, or the ship been setting too high out of the water.
Okay.
Yep. Or their GPS was off and they meant for this and got that.
Okay. The next image, I think, should be
that's the other way.
That's the other way.
Yeah.
This was one of the ships that was hit. They didn't hit any subs, so we're looking at the ship to the left there. And you can see where the impact was there. And then I thought we had did I not send you the one from the bay, from the, okay. Well, we'll get to it, I'm sure.
They had these.
Yes, I know. I see what you're doing there, yeah. Yes, of course they hide those.
Okay.
We hide ours too, by the way.
Yes, we do.
Again, this was, I think this was one of the scout ships that was hit. You can see the impact about midship right there. Yeah.
No, this is where a UAS made contact with a superstructure, and it was followed by a radical disassembly.
I guess that's one way of putting it. Yes.
Well, that's the way they want.
Yeah. Again, you can see the strikes on the at this particular point. You can see the strikes that are on the bow section of the ship. On the ship on the bottom of the image here, you can see where the radar arrays were taken out. So to the Yeah, just after. There you go, right there. That's where they were.
Wow. Well, they won't be doing much with that.
No, all 4 of these ships were disabled. None of them sank, obviously, but
Yeah,
all 4
well,
of them
the
are
one
disabled.
on the front is taking, or the lower one there looks like it's been taking on water because look at the pump. It's pumping.
I can see the pump. Yeah.
That's not for cooling.
Yeah, I think if we look at when we get to the next, or one of the other images we have here of this port, you'll see where some of the fuel has been struck in this, and it's been leaking into the bay. You can see an oil slick that's been out there. But yeah, I think it's the top. I think it's the top ship. I think was the one that was hit.
Yeah,
this,
and the
this line up here.
It appears as though the deck here was too.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand if these ships and most of the Black Sea Fleet itself, and of course what's been going on in the Sea of Azov, if these ships are targets, why would the Russians keep them in Novorossiysk like this? I mean, that's a pretty forward deployed location for the Black Sea. Why would you keep it there?
They have plans.
If you want to continue with your explanation, I'll be back in just a moment.
Yeah, they've got plans. They want to look. I'm confident that the Russians are planning on going into the Baltic, and I'm fairly confident that the Poles are also confident that the Russians are going to be trying to go into the Baltics as well as in Poland. Poland wouldn't be spending the billions of dollars and placing Dragon's Teeth and all of the minefields and then another row of Dragon's Teeth plus the anti-tank ditches, putting into trenches for soldiers with anti-tank weapons. They wouldn't be doing all of that if they weren't planning, if they didn't know that the Russians doing that. And AR usually put that into there you go, AR. Let's say that they'll take that, but take on Poland and other campaigns? No way. They're going to take the Baltics first. And yes, Putin is reckless. Right, you got to have alternative views. Everybody, you can't be an echo chamber here. Well, he can't even move them to the Sea. Right, he can't move them to the Sea of Azov. He would have to move them over to the Caspian Sea. That would be his only option, would be moving them to the Caspian Sea. But the Caspian Sea isn't even safe. You know, he's best to keep them where he's got some air defense, and, you know, he doesn't have that much air defense in the Caspian Sea. He's got to keep everything close to where he's got air defense. And, of course, it's not working. What air defense doing?
It's a bunch of tracer fire into the night sky.
Yeah, and that's going to become more prevalent here in the near future as well. There's a lot of things.
I do apologize. I had to step away for a second. Next imagery, please. Yeah, this is where you can see where the fuel's leaked out into the bay.
Yeah.
Right here, what we have here, you'll see this collapsed area right in the center. This is a strike that I've never seen the Ukrainians do before. Maybe you have some information on this, but I've never seen the Ukrainians hit a grain elevator before.
I haven't either.
I've never seen that before, but this is where they hit it. And of course, you know, same port in Novorossiysk, but this particular port handles 300,000 tons of grain exports, and it all comes through this elevator here.
I need this lat line.
Okay, hang on just a second. Zoom out, please.
Where's this Novorossiysk, or where's this?
No, this is in Novorossiysk. Is that the one? Okay, yeah. Here you go.
See, I happen to know a little bit about the grain industry. I grew up in it. My father owned feed mills, fertilizer plants, liquid feed, mineral plants, dry fertilizer, all that good stuff. So we're going to have a look-see here at this. So this is what I wanted to see. What this conveyor is, what they're going to lose here.
Of course, there has to be a truck in the way, doesn't there?
Yeah, but I'm going to go the other way too. So we're. Okay, so this is going to stop their entire export. Okay, so they've got storage here. This is
that storage is actually this is dated imagery here. The one the still is obviously is 72 hours old, but just across the other side of that, where you are, so across the
the
elevator
But
there,
I was getting to.
They've got another.
Right, so they've built a new facility over here.
Right.
Okay. But what I'm saying is that with the damage that is done from here, okay, when you look at this, they're after this. Everything is from this is what they're going after here. See, they've hit here and here and here and this conveyor here and this conveyor here. So they've even hit this facility, and let me switch again. They've hit this facility here in the middle, right here. Okay? And so that is shutting off everything over here, is what they've done. They've stopped everything. So they weren't worried about this grain or this. They wanted to shut down all of this. over here, which to me looks like what they're going to do for production. So this is going to shut down all of their import into their facility, because this is where they're using it domestically. See what I'm saying? Putting it on trains and moving it throughout the country. There is no grain loading over here. See that? None of this. There's no. I mean, there's a small amount of grain load out right here. Okay, but this is basically just one elevator, or maybe 3 elevators right there that you've got right there. So you've only got, 3 tracks here that you can load on. You're only loading 3 train cars at a time. That's all they've got from this facility here. Whereas at over here, they've got all of this. They can load out through here. This is a lot more streamlined, faster, and they've got all of these silos. And by the way, just so you know, when they do silos like this, if it looks like there's 4 silos here, there's actually 5, because there's one in the middle. So every time you see a row, if it looks like there's, 8.
Well, you can count the stairs right there.
Oh, you mean the height of this?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's over 100 feet tall. But I'm saying that inside, if it looks like there's 4 silos, there's a 5th one inside of the middle. So there's actually more storage there than you think.
Now, if we go back, can we jump? Because there's an image of that building there.
Yeah, we can go back over here.
So if we jump to the next, you can see what they've done here.
Yeah, so that's gone there. And this is probably the drive building that drives the belt.
I see.
Okay.
Yeah.
So basically, what they have is we got belts coming across from over here. This is just a long. If you've ever seen a coal mine where they've got the curved up belt and the coals flowing through, they do the exact same thing here. Okay. And they'll run, either multiple belts or a real wide belt through it. And if you ever break that, that's a bitch to get fixed, but it can be done. But they've hit it here in so many places that this is going to be down for a long time. But this has basically shut down grain imports other than what they can do through this line right here.
Well, this is, if I understand it correctly, this is an export facility.
Yeah, well, then exports are gone, and they can't get anything from the main facility. Let me go back to the other one here. So they can't get anything from here over to here. This would have moved millions and millions and millions of bushels a day. This thing's moving at 30 mile an hour.
Yeah, it's 300,000 tons.
Yeah. So,
that's what they're moving.
Yeah, so it would have moved.
Day.
Yeah. So I don't know how many millions of bushels that is, but it's a lot. But yeah, this is a huge facility. This is equivalent to the facility that my uncle used to own down at the Newport News shipyard. He didn't have the conveyor belt that ran all the way over to here. He just comes in here and has a parking area, has a bunch of tanks, and then where he can load all of his trucks. But yeah, they've really killed this export, because with all this gone, everything that comes into here can't go out anymore. They're restricted to this, and all it's going to take is another strike here and another strike here, or even if they went and hit this here. Let me go back to the picture. Oh, it is. Yeah, I think they shut it down altogether.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think they've already hit it in that area.
Yeah.
And if we look, if we have the
look
next
here.
image.
That's gone too.
Yeah, that's gone. You see the grain pour out.
Right.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Just, yeah. I don't mean to laugh.
It's a grain port.
It's a grain port. You know, you hit it and all of a sudden grain's just pouring out everywhere.
Right.
The next image, if we see that, they've hit the main building at this facility right here.
Oh, yeah.
So this is before it crosses into the conveyor belt. They've hit all of this.
Wow. Yeah, they're done.
And then you can see they've hit, you can see the strikes they've hit. And then, of course, to the right, you see the main building there, the two main buildings.
Well, they hit here too.
Yes, they did.
In fact, they've hit all of them.
They hit multiple silos there. And you can see they struck the building across the way too.
Yeah, this is closed. Look at that.
Yes, it's offline. It's offline indefinitely.
No, but I'm talking about the pile of grain.
Yes, I see the pile of grain. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, if you hit a grain silo, it's obviously grain's going to pour out of it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's closed. That facility is closed. Every single one of these. Yeah, at least 10 of these tanks are offline. As well as the conveyors. Yeah, they're not going to be operating there for 3 to 6 months at least.
That's if they can get the parts in to fix it.
Right. Well, no, you can. That's the great part about a grain mill. There's not a whole lot. I mean, you can steal.
Oh, is it pretty simple?
Yeah, you can steal. It's rollers, motors, gear drives, and belts. You know, the biggest part is getting it aligned. If you don't have your belts perfectly aligned, it'll jump up over the side, throw your material off, and the belt will come off, or it'll come over and run on the end. So as long as you get your alignment and your belt straight, you're good to go. And you think that's a small operation. Okay, what else we got on this?
Okay, so
here we go.
If we're to go back to what we were talking about earlier in the broadcast, we were talking about Putin going out to the Kuril Islands. Well, one of the areas out there is Kamchatka. Kamchatka is where they have the Pacific Fleet subbase. And as you can see, what they're doing out here, that's an anti-drone net that they have put over one of their nuclear submarines. And so all
these are not anti-drone nets. These are veils.
Veils. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, veils. And we can see what they've put in underneath. This is to stop USVs. No. Further out the buoy lines.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah.
That's to stop USVs. Yeah. And drone boats coming in. Now, this is 7,500 kilometers from Ukraine. Right? So the Ukrainians are not hitting this. So why are the Russians doing this? This is because they're concerned about the Japanese. Again,
here we go.
Same thing. Yeah.
And again.
Yeah.
That's all of them.
That's all of them. Yeah. So they're putting on these drone nets for everything. So that's the satellite imagery that we have. This is only a few days old, so you can see what the Russians are doing to prepare out there.
All right, and yes, the Google Earth imagery is old. This is satellite imagery
Yes.
from only days
Yeah.
ago.
Yes, this is just a few days ago. Same thing with the hit on Novorossiysk. I think it was the port hit on Novorossiysk. I think it was the 12th. I think it was 3 days ago, or the night of the 11th, morning of the 12th, I think is when it was. So, but it's only a few days old.
All right. Any more questions? If you got them, put them in the chat now.
I don't want. We had a lot of questions.
All right. Well, I didn't know if we'd raised any more here.
No.
Okay.
We've kind of shut down Q&A because Jeff had to leave. So.
Yep. All right, I'm not seeing anything else. So, Johnny, you got anything else you want to cover before we get out of here?
No. I think it's been a great show.
Yep.
Yep. And thanks. We had an extended one today on an odd day, but we had some scheduling issues the other day. So, and we had some technical issues today. We weren't sure if we were going to get sorted out, but glad we did. But I would just want to thank all the listeners and watchers, and I guess we'll see you on Tuesday.
Yes, sir, you will. All right, folks, so I am in the mountains near a huge underground facility. I will be leaving here and headed back into the big city here in the next probably 24 hours. And then the first part of next week will be up in the Northeast again. And then God only knows where I'm going to be from there. So definitely be set up for you on Tuesday. We've done great here. Everybody hit that thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Save this video. The average viewer duration on a long video is like 6 to 8 minutes. And on this broadcast, it's been 27 minutes and 15 seconds. The highest average viewer duration of any broadcast we've ever done. So that's pretty good. People were wanting to get the truth. Anyway, thank you all for being here, and we will see you all on the next one. Have a great day, everybody.